Kang Jin-hyuk operated as a hunter, though he was not one to capture media attention or achieve celebrity status. Holding a modest D-rank classification, his opportunities were limited to minor tasks and the leftovers overlooked by major guilds. He had accepted the grim reality of his environment long ago. Influence determined one's fate, and those lacking it, even hunters, were vulnerable to being crushed. Consequently, upon hearing an unusual noise emanating from his apartment, he investigated and was stunned by the discovery. He found a glimmering, pulsating gateway that opened into an alternate dimension populated by monsters. While the creatures were unaware of him, he realized he could traverse the portal safely. To an individual with no remaining prospects, this phenomenon represented more than just a bizarre and frightening occurrence. It was an opportunity for solitary advancement in a private dungeon. All the monsters and treasures within were available exclusively to him. Without competitors to seize the spoils, Kang Jin-hyuk had at last found a potential path to ascend the ranks. Recognizing he has no prospects to forfeit, he gathers his resolve and crosses the threshold, emerging on the initial level of a dungeon labyrinth. He has minimal time to assess his surroundings before a goblin attacks him from the left. He just manages to avoid a club aimed at his head and quickly retreats back into his attic. The creature appears bewildered, glancing around and striking at nothing. It becomes apparent that the monsters cannot perceive the portal, which also means they are unable to cross over to his location. This realization dismisses his fear. He arms himself with a baseball bat and re-enters the portal to confront the goblin directly. He strikes the goblin's cheek with the bat, launching the beast backward, and immediately follows with a thrust to its torso. After the goblin is down, he lifts his bat and brings it down on the creature's face, finishing it off. This marked his first experience hunting monsters solo. Because he was not required to divide the experience points with a party, he received the full amount. Upon the goblin's defeat, his level, which had remained static for 3 years, increased instantly. The goblin's carcass was also his to claim, possessing a potential value of up to 3 million won if sold at the appropriate venues. The following day, he transports it to a hunter's market, attempting to sell it to a vendor. The merchant discerns Jin-hyuk's lack of dungeon experience, noting that his handling of the corpse had substantially lowered its market price. Nonetheless, Jin-hyuk successfully secured an offer exceeding the 3 million won he had anticipated. To receive the payment instantly, he only needed to disclose the location where the goblin was hunted. This was information Jin-hyuk could not share. If the dungeon in his attic were discovered, his potential earnings would evaporate. As he contemplates a solution to the predicament, a team of hunters belonging to the Black Dragon Guild aggressively enters the vicinity. They are agitated because an unauthorized individual poached a kill within their designated territory. Initially, they suspect Jin-hyuk is the culprit and move to challenge him. However, the merchant diverts their focus toward a blonde-haired hunter who seems unaware of the developing conflict. The hunters approach the blonde man to challenge him, proceeding to assault him until he is severely injured and almost immobile. He had infiltrated their domain and attempted to hunt creatures without authorization. They speculate he might even be the serial killer they were seeking. The man, scarcely capable of speech, is then hauled out of the establishment for further questioning. Jin-hyuk realizes that the individual who was violently beaten could very well have been him. Witnessing this altercation and understanding that he cannot plausibly fabricate the origin of his goblin, he reconsiders selling his spoils at that location. He recognizes the necessity of finding an alternative method to liquidate his items, one that avoids confrontations with enforcers from larger guilds and does not endanger his life. Immediately upon returning home, Jin-hyuk resolves to re-enter the dungeon to focus on enhancing his strength. Prior to entering, he must equip himself sufficiently to endure an excursion into such a hazardous environment. He prepares a teleportation stone, enabling an escape from peril back to his apartment, and a monster tracking compass, which identifies any creatures within a 50-meter radius. Equipped with these items and his reliable baseball bat, he enters the dungeon for a session dedicated to gaining levels. He engages in a continuous hunt, with every monster defeated raising his level by 1. The dungeon, aptly named the Goblin Labyrinth, is teeming with goblins. For an individual of his low level, it serves as the ideal location to hunt and cultivate his power. Following an extended period of hunting, his inventory storage is nearly full. He has adequate space remaining for only one more goblin. Given that it is his last catch, he hopes for a larger specimen that would yield a greater profit. His compass indicates a goblin moving toward his position, which is opportune timing. His plan is to conceal himself and launch a surprise attack before the creature notices him. He positions himself around a corner, awaiting the precise moment to strike, then swings his bat toward the target's face. However, the target is not a goblin. He has struck an exceptionally short man. The individual yells at Jinyuk in an unfamiliar dialect that he cannot comprehend. Jinyuk quickly bows as a gesture of apology, an action that appears to somewhat appease the man. The man retrieves 2 necklaces from a pouch and offers one to Jinyuk. The moment Jinyuk wears it, he finds he can understand the man's speech, leading him to 2 realizations. The first realization is that this person is furious with him, which is understandable given that Jinyuk just struck him in the face with a bat. The second realization is that the individual is not a man, but a dwarf, a mythological being he had previously only encountered in works of fantasy. The irate dwarf persists in shouting at Jinyuk as Jinyuk assists in gathering the items that were scattered during the encounter. All the retrieved items appear to be of exceptionally high quality, yet Jinyuk has little opportunity to appreciate them while being berated. The dwarf observes Jinyuk's bat and retrieves it. He insists on knowing its origin, a question that puzzles the young man. The item possesses no remarkable qualities in Jinyuk's view, yet the dwarf is exceptionally persistent in his inquiry. While it is merely a standard aluminum baseball bat, the dwarf appears convinced it is composed of an extremely valuable material known as orichalcum. This common bat holds such immense worth in the dwarf's estimation that he considers it priceless. He proposes an exchange, several of his unique items for the bat. Jinyuk, finding no grounds to decline the offer, accompanies the dwarf back to his workspace. The dwarf carries the bat into the rear of the workshop as Jinyuk surveys the surroundings. Jinyuk observes the various weapons displayed in the area, contemplating which he might choose. However, the dwarf reemerges shortly thereafter, holding Jinyuk's newly enhanced baseball bat. Inexplicably, the bat is now shining a vivid red and emitting a faint glow. Jinyuk questions if it is truly his original weapon, but the dwarf affirms that this is merely a characteristic of orichalcum. The material begins as a pliable and fragile metal, gradually transforming into a resilient and sturdy substance through successive enchantments. That specific term catches Jinyuk's attention. It appears the dwarf has, by some method, imbued his weapon with an enchantment. Such items are exceedingly scarce, typically only obtained from elite, high-level monsters ranked A-grade or higher. Executing a few experimental swings with the modified bat confirms it feels entirely distinct from his memory of it. He finds it difficult to accept that an object of this caliber could be crafted artificially. This dwarf, and indeed the entire dungeon, might represent the significant opportunity he has been seeking this whole time. Jinyuk examines the item's properties via a status menu. The bat has been transformed into a legendary baseball bat, possessing S-grade durability and an automatic retrieval feature. His previously mundane aluminum bat is now a legendary and exceptionally rare piece of equipment. He recognizes that selling the item would yield a massive profit, but the bat has become bound to him, rendering it untradeable. The dwarf included the automatic retrieval enchantment, ensuring that Jinyuk is the only individual capable of wielding it. Ultimately, he cannot profit financially from the bat, though it remains a legendary artifact. Despite this, other avenues for earning income are available to him. His inventory is filled with goblin carcasses ready to be sold. The primary obstacle is the lack of a suitable marketplace where he can sell them without attracting undesirable notice from the major guilds. His remaining alternative is the hunter industry's clandestine black market. These dealers operate discreetly, ask no questions, and handle the processing of monster corpses effectively. Furthermore, contacting them is straightforward. They frequently distribute business cards to lower-ranked hunters in need of funds, meaning Jinyuk already possesses numerous contacts. He returns to his residence and utilizes one of the cards to locate the address for one of these illicit markets. The business card appeared extremely disreputable, yet at that moment he possessed no alternative. As Jinyuk scanned the area for evidence of the market's existence, an individual called out to him from a higher location. The man identified himself as Deputy Cho Hyung-il and extended an invitation for Jinyuk to visit their office and meet the proprietor. There, Jinyuk was introduced to Lee Jun-chul, a predatory lender operating under the guise of a loan agent who was also involved in the illicit trade of monster remains. They requested an examination of the carcasses prior to any discussion of compensation, prompting Jinyuk to retrieve them from his inventory for display. Both men were astonished by the sheer quantity of remains Jinyuk produced. Although Jinyuk was obviously inexperienced, he had successfully acquired 20 goblin carcasses. Furthermore, the specimens were in exceptional shape. While the heads showed damage consistent with blows from a baseball bat, the rest of the bodies were pristine. The quality was so high that Deputy Cho struggled to conceal his enthusiasm about acquiring them. The trio commenced price negotiations, but their discussion was abruptly halted when other black market personnel rushed in, reporting the appearance of a monster nearby. A slight possibility exists for monster remains to lure other creatures, and it appeared that displaying 20 fresh goblin carcasses had served as a potent signal to nearby monsters. Compounding the situation, the creatures that arrived were a pair of orcs, adversaries far beyond Jinyuk's current capabilities. Given the circumstances, his only viable option for survival seemed to be retrieving his carcasses and fleeing immediately. Unfortunately, that opportunity had passed. The initial orc had reached their position and appeared prepared to attack them viciously. As Jinyuk was the sole hunter present, he was the only one with the power to confront the beasts. This did not, however, guarantee he could defeat them. The orc rushed at him, brandishing its battle axe. He evaded the first strike, but the follow-up attack descended directly toward his head. At that proximity, evasion was impossible. It felt as if his end had arrived, fated to be a pathetic demise. This changed when his recently enhanced bat materialized from his inventory, intercepting the blow fractions of a second before impact. The block was so forceful that it knocked the orc backward momentarily. This seemed to indicate another of the bat's enchantments, a presence detection capability. If his new weapon possessed such abilities, he might have a possibility of success. The orc advanced once more, but Jinyuk, now more assured, was prepared. He tightened his grip on the bat and struck downward at the orc's knee, destabilizing the creature. With the monster unbalanced, he delivered a subsequent blow to its face, fracturing its neck and dispatching it instantly. Defeating just one orc resulted in his level rapidly ascending from 24 to 36. He had no time to acknowledge this achievement, as the second orc located them and initiated its own attack. This time, however, he was prepared. He sidestepped the assault, moved to the creature's rear, and struck its back forcefully with the bat. He then shifted his position and delivered a final lethal strike to its head, terminating it immediately. In this manner, Jinyuk successfully dispatched 2 orcs with ease in just a few moments. This feat highlighted the true potency of his enchanted weapon. With the confrontation resolved, he confidently advised the men to restart their negotiations, stipulating that the carcasses of the 2 defeated orcs must now be included in the transaction. That day, he departed with a sense of accomplishment. He had effectively negotiated a payment 15% higher than the prevailing market price from the dealers. The sum of money now in his bank account felt almost surreal. Having finally managed the sale of the goblin corpses, his complete attention could return to hunting. Because he had protected the black market dealer and his associates, they agreed to a continued business arrangement. This meant Jinyuk would no longer need to worry about finding a venue to sell his monster remains. This decision was likely made because the dealer recognized Jinyuk was not a simple, low-level thief selling stolen goods. Instead, he was clearly a high-caliber hunter, capable of eliminating 2 orcs with minimal effort. However, even with his enchanted bat and his newfound prowess, his current set of equipment was inadequate for hunting higher-grade monsters. Only one option remained for him to obtain an upgrade, and if he managed the situation adeptly, he might even acquire the equipment at no cost. The following day, he acquired a large case filled with beer cans and other alcohol as an offering for the dwarf. Given the dwarf's intense appreciation for aluminum, which he mistook for orichalcum, this gift was comparable to a chest of treasure. The dwarf was incredulous that the entire crate contained what he perceived as auriculacum. He tasted the beer, but immediately spat it out, finding the flavor disgusting. To pacify the dwarf and avert another tirade, Jinyuk offered him some soju instead. This beverage was different, and its taste proved sufficient to satisfy the dwarf temporarily, though it still seemed to be missing the potency he sought. Seeing an opening, the dwarf assigned a task to Jinyuk. He required a specific material to be mined. He tasked Jinyuk with a quest to excavate mithril ore. The relationship between this ore and the alcohol was not apparent. However, Jinyuk desired free gear and recognized he was not in a position to choose his assignments. If this was the required method to get the equipment, he would comply. He ventured deeper into the labyrinth and eventually entered a clearing within a forest. This new area was considerably larger than he had imagined. A system menu appeared before him, indicating he had successfully reached the second level of the labyrinth. He was then offered the chance to register his location as a warp point. Unfamiliar with the concept, he nonetheless accepted the prompt. This action caused a new portal to open nearby. This gateway enabled him to move between the first and second floors conveniently, similar to a mechanic in a video game. With this new transport system established, Jinyuk pressed further into the labyrinth to search for the mithril ore he had been sent to retrieve. The second level was designated Dogs and Skeletons. In the same manner that the first floor was populated with goblins, this area was filled with feral monster dogs leaping toward him. These creatures were considerably weaker than the orcs Jinyuk had faced a few days prior, which meant they represented an easy source of experience points. He readied his bat and charged directly into an advancing pack of the dogs. By the conclusion of this engagement, he had successfully killed 25 orcs and gathered their remains. According to current market valuations, these corpses were projected to earn him a substantial 200 million won. However, he could not permit the excitement over the potential money to divert his attention. He still had an objective to complete: mining mithril ore. Jinyuk ventured deeper into the dungeon and was subsequently confronted by skeletons. The floor was, after all, named Dogs and Skeletons proved to be a vexing category of monster. Their bodies held no monetary value, and the sole method of defeating them was to shatter their core. This requirement made the combat all the more grueling, particularly given the large quantity of them approaching him. Despite the difficulty, his existing skills and current level ensured he was capable of eliminating them. By the end of the protracted fight, he was exhausted. He came to the realization that the dwarf had likely sent him to this location specifically to avoid dealing with these troublesome monsters himself. Still, a significant benefit resulted from this ordeal. The act of destroying these skeletons had advanced his level to 100, which signified he was now eligible to receive a class change. His class would be determined automatically, based on his previous patterns of action. Given the substantial amount of fighting he had undertaken recently, he fully expected to be classified as a berserker or a warrior. Instead, the system designated him as a cleric. He pressed onward and eventually succeeded in mining the mithril ore that the dwarf had requested. This outcome was surprising, as the dwarf had not anticipated Jinyuk would survive the experience. Jinyuk was indeed alive, but he was depleted from the continuous combat he had endured. Even so, he did not depart from the encounter without securing something for himself. He managed to covertly take a portion of the mithril ore, having noted its expensive appearance, and then delivered the rest to the dwarf. Since Jinyuk had successfully acquired the ore, the dwarf agreed to use some of the material to fabricate any item Jinyuk desired. As he already possessed an excellent weapon, his next requirement was a form of armor that could resist heavy attacks from monsters. He specified a preference for something lightweight and of high quality. The dwarf consented and began the work immediately. The crafting process required more time than Jinyuk could wait. Consequently, he returned to his home to sleep for a few hours. He awoke approximately 6 hours later and went back to the workshop to see the dwarf's progress. By that time, the dwarf had finished crafting the armor and appeared satisfied with his creation. It was a mithril chainmail armor designed to be worn discreetly under his shirt and hoodie. Jinyuk put the armor on, and without warning, the dwarf struck him squarely in the chest with a hammer. The dwarf seemingly believed that a practical demonstration was the most effective method of explanation. An attack of that force would normally have inflicted broken ribs at the very least. However, thanks to the new armor, Jinyuk felt almost nothing. With protective gear this resilient, combined with his legendary baseball bat, his combat effectiveness had risen exponentially. His encounter with the dwarf was undeniably the fortunate event he needed to transform his life. The dwarf had more prepared, however. Next, he presented Jinyuk with a large barrel. It contained the soju Jinyuk had provided earlier. Jinyuk returned to his apartment to sample the beverage. He discovered the dwarf was correct. Merely storing the soju in a cask constructed from mithril ore had altered the drink into something entirely different. This remarkable outcome gave Jinyuk an idea. He contacted the black market dealer again, proposing another business deal. This time, he offered to sell kobold corpses and the exceptional quality liquor. In a different section of the city, the Titan Guild had just completed their training near some newly activated gates. Their exercise should have been finished, but a sudden new wave of lizard men began flooding through the portals. It appeared to be an anomaly gate, disgorging 3 times the number of enemies they had just vanquished. One of the guild members recommended requesting assistance from another guild. However, Doyon, the deputy guild master, possessed too much pride to call others for help. He insisted his subordinates maintain their formation and fight. Jin-hyuk, conversely, was experiencing a much less stressful time. He had just officially registered his class as a cleric, and furthermore, he had been promoted from D rank to C rank. Clerics are a rare healing class, and it is widely known that premier guilds actively recruit them. This implied he might finally be eligible for recruitment by a guild. Suddenly, an injured, blood-covered hunter burst through the doors, desperately searching for a cleric. Jin-hyuk raised his hand, volunteering his services. The man immediately escorted him to the site, where the Titan Guild members were engaged with the Lizardmen hordes. Jin-hyuk was instructed to stay in the rear line with the other clerics and heal as many combatants as possible. He wished to contribute in other ways, but the guild member reiterated that his only duty was to heal from the back, promising he would be compensated accordingly once the battle concluded. The presence of the healers in the area was sufficient to bolster the guild members, giving them a surge of endurance to continue fighting. Nevertheless, the waves of monsters were simply too numerous for them to manage, leading another cleric to suggest calling in a support guild to help dispatch the enemies more quickly. It was clear that if no action was taken, the entire group faced annihilation. Just as Jin-hyuk was considering what to do, he detected a hostile presence approaching from his rear. His bat had just intercepted a lethal strike from one of the lizardmen. The creature had somehow infiltrated past all the hunters and was attempting to eliminate the healers, targeting him first. This meant the rear defenses had been compromised. Only clerics were stationed at the back line. If these monsters managed to get through them, they would overwhelm the guild members in an instant. Left with no alternative, Jin-hyuk gripped his bat and swung it at the lizard man that had attacked him, sending the creature flying with a single impact. He notified the other clerics about the breach, stating that he was the only one who could stop the monsters. The creatures had reached the back line by using a concealment technique and were now attempting an ambush. Jin-hyuk instructed the clerics to maintain their focus on healing and to leave the lizardmen to him. It would be a difficult task, but he was the only one present who could stop their assault. The other clerics were concerned for him, as they believed he was just a conventional healer like themselves. Jin-hyuk, conversely, rushed forward to engage the enemies head-on, assuring the others not to worry. He would not have made such statements if he lacked at least some confidence in his abilities. Of course, despite his assurances, he was still apprehensive about the situation. In the end, however, he successfully held his ground against the rampaging creatures. One of them managed to slip past him while his guard was down and made its way directly toward another cleric. Jin-hyuk gave chase, then leaped through the air, managing to stop the monster just in time to prevent it from attacking the healer. His hurried attack left him vulnerable to a stab from behind, but thanks to the dwarf's chain armor, the blow barely affected him. The monster was stunned that its attack had been ineffective, and Jin-hyuk used that opportunity to counter with a swing of his bat to its face. He was somehow managing to hold them off all by himself. Because of his efforts, the other healers could focus on their duties without fearing a sneak attack. But that was not the only factor shifting in their favor. The lizardmen froze as a new combatant entered the battle. Suddenly, a powerful man joined the fight and eliminated one of the monsters with a single hit. This newcomer was Seo Sang-ho, the guildmaster of the Titan Guild. He acknowledged Jin-hyuk and inquired if he was the one who had dispatched all the monsters in that area. The C-rank hunter admitted that he was responsible for defeating the creatures, though he was more confused about the identity of this powerful new man. The other clerics were surprised that Jin-hyuk did not recognize the S-rank hunter, Sang-ho. He was so formidable that his presence alone signaled that the battle was likely approaching its end. With no time to spare, Sang-ho rushed off to join his subordinates on the front line, but not before promising to reward Jin-hyuk properly for his assistance later. Even from a brief observation, it was apparent to everyone, Jin-hyuk included, that S-rank hunters operated in a completely separate category. When Sang-ho was present, he became the most formidable force in the engagement. He landed directly in the center of the conflict, and his very presence instantly elevated everyone's spirits. This was true for all except Endoyen, who appeared visibly annoyed that the guildmaster had arrived. There was nothing improper about a fellow guild member intervening to provide support, but Endoyen's pride would not allow him to accept the situation gracefully. Sang-ho immediately took command. He issued orders to the combatants, instantly capturing the attention of everyone around him. With that accomplished, he did not wait for the guild members to evacuate the immediate vicinity before he unleashed a powerful attack on the ground. The strike generated a massive shockwave, sending all the lizardmen flying. His single blow was sufficient to eliminate a large number of them in one action. In a matter of minutes, with Sang-ho's participation, all the monsters were easily dispatched. Once he was certain that his guild members were safe, he seized Ndoyen by the jacket to reprimand him. He demanded to know what Ndoyen was thinking when he chose to risk his own life and the lives of his subordinates by engaging the overwhelming force alone. Ndoyen claimed he was only trying to safeguard the guild's reputation, but Sang-ho knew the truth was that Ndoyen sought only to protect his personal pride. The two engaged in a brief, intense stare-down until one of the guild members reminded Sang-ho that he needed to dismiss the clerics who had assisted. The guild master composed himself and went over to address the healers, thanking them personally. He gave special attention to Jin Hyuk, identifying him as the main reason so many people had survived the encounter. As a token of gratitude, Sang-ho offered Jin Hyuk immediate entry into the guild, allowing him to bypass the standard registration process. This was an offer Ndoyen could not accept. He quickly interjected, attempting to disparage Jin Hyuk as a mere D-rank hunter who had only gotten lucky. Sang-ho, in response, did not hesitate to remind his deputy that this mere former D-rank had saved numerous lives, which would have been lost as a direct result of Ndoyen's stubbornness. He then forced Ndoyen to apologize to Jin Hyuk, an action that served as a significant blow to the deputy guildmaster's pride. Even after this, Jin Hyuk respectfully declined the invitation. He expressed that he had no interest in joining any guild that permitted individuals like Ndoyen to hold any type of authority. This was the final straw. Ndoyen rushed at Jin Hyuk with an enhanced punch, but a defensive bat strike directly to his stomach was enough to stop him completely in his tracks. The impact is sufficient to render Ndoyen unconscious instantly. The incident gains so much notoriety that it is featured in a news report by the following day. The leadership within the Titan Guild finds the outcome concerning Ndoyen intolerable. Not only had he been publicly humiliated by a mere C-rank hunter, but he had also been stripped of his authority as deputy guildmaster. They insist that the C-rank individual present himself to them to provide an explanation for his actions. Sang-ho, however, disputes their position. Ndoyen had not only endangered the lives of several guild members due to his pride, but he had also assaulted someone who had fought on the guild's behalf. This constituted more than sufficient grounds for his demotion. This argument effectively silences the assembled individuals. Having no further business with them, he dismisses the men. The guildmaster's thoughts return to the remarkable C-rank hunter he had witnessed recently. He resolves that he must recruit Kang Jin Hyuk into his guild at any cost before the man becomes even more powerful. The man in question, Jin Hyuk, is relaxing in his apartment, enjoying a beverage while reviewing his financial expenditures. As he had earned a significant sum from hunting, his spending had surpassed its usual levels, resulting in absurdly high expenses. Had he anticipated this financial situation, he would have taken the supplementary payment the Titan Guild had offered. Ultimately, however, it is of no consequence, as he possesses a far superior method for generating income. Following a period of necessary rest, he returns to the dungeon to acquire more monster remains. Engaging with the same familiar monsters no longer satisfies him. Having grown more powerful, he now requires more formidable adversaries. He ventures further into the second level than he had previously, and soon finds himself confronting a small legion of orcs. One attempts to ambush him from the rear, but he skillfully evades the strike before launching his own counterattack. The blow vanquishes the orc instantly, just as several others converge on his position in the hallway. Only a few days prior, such an encounter would have meant certain death, but owing to his new gear, he is able to dispatch all of them with ease. By the fight's conclusion, he tallies a total of 20 orc carcasses, which should yield enough profit to keep him financially secure for an entire year. Possessing ample stamina, he opts to proceed slightly deeper into the dungeon, soon finding himself at the entrance to the third floor, titled the Temple Guardian's Labyrinth. On initial inspection, the area appears devoid of monsters, but this sense of tranquility is almost immediately shattered by a powerful tremor shaking the earth. A massive hand erupts from the ground beneath him, and Jinyuk just narrowly manages to get clear of its path. The hand is part of a stone golem, an artificial creature constructed from mana. The golem's attacks are too swift for him to evade, and they carry such force that even a successful block sends him reeling backward a significant distance. This situation leaves him with few alternatives except to try his best to retaliate. The golem appears to be exceptionally strong, yet it lacks the intellect to utilize that strength effectively. Jinyuk exploits this weakness and succeeds in striking its head, breaking it into fragments and causing the creature to collapse. However, it does not take long for the golem to begin regenerating itself. Jin-Yuk had overlooked a critical detail regarding golems. The creature could only be vanquished by shattering its core completely. Upon understanding this, Jin-Yuk attempts to retreat and establish some space to reconsider his strategy. However, the monster regenerates its hand quickly enough to seize him before he can get away. His options for escaping the predicament were limited, but just then, an arrow suddenly flies past and embeds itself in the golem's chest. Jin-Yuk seizes the opening and follows with a precise thrust from his bat, destroying the golem's core and eliminating it permanently. He survived the dangerous situation due to the intervention of the unknown individual who fired the arrow. He pivots to express his gratitude to his rescuer, but is stunned. He does not see the dwarf he was anticipating, but rather a striking woman with unusual-looking ears. These features identify her as an elf. Jin-Yuk inclines his head to thank her for her help, but fails to perceive the elf advancing on him while his head is lowered. He has only a moment to register her presence before she snatches him by the collar, pulling him close to question him. She has never encountered him within this dungeon previously, and is inquisitive about his identity and origin. The elf is obviously not an inhabitant of Jin-Yuk's world. She is unaware of his home, and his attire seems strange to her. She subjects him to a rapid series of inquiries as he attempts to break free from her hold. She finally releases him when he states that he accessed the dungeon that same day. This information implies that he is aware of the dungeon's entrance location. She shoves him to the ground and lets go of her bow, realizing she has at last discovered a path out of this place. Jin-Yuk gets to his feet and asks for an explanation for her unnecessarily hostile behavior. The elf disregards his question and instead insists that he guide her to the exit. He is not pleased with her abruptly issuing commands. However, he notes her attractive appearance and decides to overlook her demeanor for the time being. She states that if he successfully leads her from the dungeon, she will provide him with suitable compensation. She identifies herself as a platinum-ranked mercenary, implying she is trustworthy. Her name is Lucia, a half-elf who considers herself to be quite well known. She seems to expect that he would have heard of her. Jin-Yuk, however, has no comprehension of her claims or her identity. Lucia reiterates her status as a platinum-ranked mercenary and presents her insignia, but Jin-Yuk has no prior knowledge of any of these things. She wonders if he originates from an isolated rural region, questioning how he could be ignorant of the badge and her reputation. He informs her that he is from Seoul in Korea. This response now causes her to be confused by the unfamiliar names, leading her to suspect that a certain eccentric mage's dimensional travel spell might have actually worked. She communicates these suspicions to him. In simple terms, a magic user from her dimension had placed an enchantment on the dungeon, which resulted in it being transported into his dimension. Such a phenomenon did not seem plausible, yet it appeared to be precisely what had occurred. However, given that it was a dimensional displacement, reversing the magic would theoretically allow her to return to her own world. Jin-Yuk had sensed that things were not normal, but this confirmed the dungeon was not native to his reality. If this location reverted to its original plane, it would create a significant problem for him. He inquired if she intended to send the dungeon back immediately, but she was unable to. It would be excessively difficult to reverse the enchantment from their current position, although a specific, helpful location did exist. This place was a hidden room on the current floor, which she had located a long time prior while attempting to find an exit. She requested his help in reaching that room and guaranteed she would compensate him for his assistance. The terms seemed reasonable, so he consented to help her get to the concealed chamber. They set off, defeating a few orcs as they traveled. Jin-Yuk observed that she was considerably more powerful than he had initially believed. The arrow she had fired earlier was clearly very potent. He realized that starting a fight with her in this environment would put him at a severe disadvantage. His most prudent option was to maintain cooperation and continue assessing the situation. After walking for a while longer, they chose to rest in a secure area. Jin-Yuk had some chocolates in his pockets for emergencies, and he offered one to her. She immediately developed a taste for it and demanded more. After she had consumed his entire supply, she requested even more. He explained that was unfortunately the last piece, which she accepted, appearing satisfied enough to resume the journey. Eventually, they arrived at a large chamber that housed the dungeon's boss. Lucia speculated that the mage's spell might be located within that room. To investigate, they would first need to eliminate the boss and clear the area. She advised him that his involvement would be minimal. He only needed to help her deliver the final blow after she had incapacitated the creature. They opened the door, and the monster immediately released an enraged roar before charging. Lucia readied an arrow, aiming directly at the boss's chest. She instructed Jinyuk to watch her closely, then utilized a technique she called aura to enhance the impact of her attack. She fired the arrow, striking the boss head-on and knocking the enormous armored creature onto its back instantly. Her single attack was sufficient to bring it down. This was the technique she planned to teach him, but first, he needed to finish the monster before it could get back up. As with the golems, he had to strike the core to defeat it. He jumped onto the chest of the fallen creature and repeatedly struck the area where he believed the core was located. One hit, however, did not seem sufficient to destroy it, and a large fist swung at him from the side. He narrowly intercepted the blow using one of his cleric abilities, the Holy Shield, and then used the resulting force to propel himself back onto the boss's chest. Recognizing that a single strike is insufficient, Jinyuk continues to hammer the spot relentlessly until the creature ceases all movement. He eventually succeeds in shattering the core, permanently defeating the beast. This victory causes him to level up again, bringing him close to level 200. With the monster vanquished, he approaches Lucia to request instruction on using aura. She informs him, however, that he has already utilized it. His Holy Shield ability had converted his divine cleric energy into aura. While he perceived it as a simple class skill, Lucia is unfamiliar with such a concept. Furthermore, his capacity to use such abilities suggests he can master aura implementation much quicker than she had anticipated. Because he possesses a strong potential for wielding it, he might be capable of imbuing his attacks with aura immediately. This, however, is contingent on one condition. She requires him to return and acquire more chocolates for her. Elsewhere in the city, Sang-ho is walking with his secretary, Lee Hyena, discussing a newly emerged anomaly near Gangnam Station. Its detection the previous day means they have approximately 5 days to prepare before a formidable monster manifests at that location. Regardless of how Sang-ho analyzes the situation, he concludes that his guild cannot handle the threat alone. Unfortunately, all other major guilds are currently deployed internationally, leaving the Titan Guild as the only available force in Korea to combat it. Hyena is tasked with continuing the search for competent local freelancers, but none of the candidates appear dependable. Sang-ho, in contrast, has a specific individual in mind. In a stroke of coincidence, that very person happens to be crossing the street opposite them. Sang-ho promptly excuses himself from the discussion with his secretary and hurries after Jin-hyuk. Jin-hyuk is transporting a large container of snacks, requested by the elf, when the guild master's voice intercepts him. Sang-ho extends his offer for Jin-hyuk to join the Titan Guild again, but Jin-hyuk has no intention of altering his previous decision. Faced with this refusal, Sang-ho proposes an alternative, a mercenary contract for Jin-hyuk. This arrangement would allow him to work for the guild without being an official member. The compensation offered is also significant. This proposition sounds more appealing, but Jin-hyuk only commits to considering it. He goes back to the dungeon and delivers the snacks to the elf. She consumes them all gleefully, and it becomes evident that such food items are not available in her world. Following her satisfying meal, Jin-hyuk inquires why she remains in the boss room when the monster has already been defeated. She indicates a magic circle on the ceiling, explaining that it serves as the connection point between the dungeon and his world. Due to this, she intends to stay in that location for the time being to analyze it. She implies that if he wishes to learn more about aura, he must supply her with more chocolates. Having finished eating, she takes his hand to begin the lesson on aura. As a first step, she must infuse her own aura into his body to demonstrate the sensation. Jin-hyuk instantly perceives the energy flowing into him. Lucia also observes a significant surge of power within Jin-hyuk's body after she transfers her aura. It appears he possesses a greater natural talent for it than she had initially anticipated. The circulation of holy power moving through Jin-hyuk's body is so impressive that Lucia is confident he will be able to understand the basics within the day. She praises his aptitude and asks if he can retain the memory of the aura's flow within him. He confirms that he can, and she acknowledges this before preparing to leave the chamber. She had initially planned to investigate the magic circle, but it now seems more efficient to fully instruct him on aura usage. She determines the best way to accomplish this is through direct, practical experience. Lucia leads him to a separate area of the dungeon and effectively pushes him into a large gathering of monsters. He immediately engages an army of goblins and kobolds simultaneously, managing to defend himself effectively while also collecting their carcasses. He turns to Lucia, demanding to know why he is suddenly fighting a horde of creatures when she said he would be learning to use aura. She explains that this combat is the method by which he will learn. While she infused a small amount of mana into his body to provide a baseline feeling, he is required to sense the rest on his own. To do this, he just needs to master the process of activating aura through his holy power. Lucia asserts that there is no better way to develop that instinct than in the midst of genuine combat. Jinyuk is more annoyed that she failed to mention any of this and instead thrust him into the conflict without warning. While they are fighting, the ground begins to tremble, and a stone golem emerges from beneath the floor. It releases a loud roar and shoves Jinhyuk away, as Lucia continues to explain that he must face a true crisis to unlock his potential. She instructs him to concentrate and attempt to feel the holy power originating from the shield he generates with his skill. The shield, she reveals, is constructed from aura, so once he gets accustomed to it, he should be able to grasp the concept quickly. This is easier said than done, as Jinyuk does not consciously activate the holy shield. He wonders how he is supposed to feel aura from a skill that engages automatically. The monster brings a huge fist down toward Jinhyuk, and he blocks it with the holy shield again. This time, however, he senses something. It is a type of energy gathering around his left hand, which is the hand that activates the skill. He concludes this must be what holy power feels like. The monster pulls back and attacks once more. Jinhyuk summons his holy shield again, only this time, it presents a different shape than he remembers. The sensation of summoning the shield is also different. He identifies this feeling as mana. The golem affords him no time to process this development and smashes down on the shield, sending Jinyuk flying backward. Lucia mocks him from her position, noting that she told him to get the hang of his skill, not to make foolish errors. He was, however, just doing what she had instructed. As he prepares for another attack, a status window appears before him, announcing that he has acquired a new skill called Holy Power Application. This new ability grants him the use of Holy Power, allowing him to augment his offensive and defensive maneuvers based on the quantity of energy utilized. This revelation indicates that it is possible to acquire skills through methods other than a formal class change. Lucia observes his momentary lack of focus and decides to intervene. It seems that battling a golem while simultaneously learning aura manipulation was too difficult for him, so she offers to manage the creature herself. Jinhyuk, however, quickly regains his composure and signals for her to stand back. Now that he has a better handle on his new abilities, he feels he should be able to deal with the situation. He charges the golem and leaps, narrowly evading another stone fist aimed directly at him. While in midair, he channels his mana into the bat, using a front flip to increase his momentum before bringing the mana-infused weapon down on the golem's head. The creature topples, but he is not yet finished. He lands on its chest and concentrates once more, trying to channel even more mana into his bat before striking it down hard onto the golem's torso, a move that simultaneously unlocks a new skill designated Holy Aura. With his empowered weapon, he thrusts the bat into the golem, successfully shattering its core. Unlocking his holy aura also facilitated the acquisition of new skills, such as Precision Strike and Unyielding. As a result of Lucia's training, he had gained 2 passive skills and 1 active skill. She, however, is more focused on the fact that he learned to apply aura in combat so rapidly. She had planned only to impart the basic principles and conclude the lesson, but this development forces her to see the training through. She takes one of her arrows and uses it to destroy a nearby wall, exposing the area to an even larger horde of monsters. Jinhyuk is not thrilled by this, but he readies his bat and prepares for another round of combat. The battle with the dungeon monsters takes a significant toll on him, and by the time he goes to sell the monster remains, he is completely drained. He is so fatigued that the black market boss, Jun-chul, comments on his condition when they meet. Jinhyuk looks as though he has just been through a war. Jun-chul chooses not to probe for details and moves directly to business, accepting the monster corpses. He also raises the topic of the alcohol Jinhyuk had sold him previously. Jun-chul had marketed the drink as a traditional artisan soju, and since its release, orders have been flooding in. The beverage had become so popular in such a short period that Jinhyuk could likely focus exclusively on selling liquor and never face financial concerns again. With enough money to last him indefinitely and a small side business already established, Jinhyuk returns home to rest. His training session with Lucia has left him immensely tired, and only seconds after lying down, he passes out. Not long after falling asleep, He is awakened by the sound of a disaster alert. A loud, automated voice urges everyone on the street to evacuate and seek safety. The day of the monster invasion is already underway. It seems to have arrived early this month. Monster invasions generally happen unpredictably, but one specific invasion occurs on a fixed one-month cycle. This type of invasion was a fairly regular event, and Jinyuk typically used these situations to hunt some low-level creatures for extra money. On this occasion, however, he was too exhausted to be concerned. He reasoned that the large guilds would manage the threat, so his involvement would not be necessary. That remained his intention until an alert arrived on his phone. It announced that due to the invasion's severity, the bounties for monsters would be increased threefold. With such lucrative rewards available, Jinyuk could no longer dismiss the event. He went out into the street to determine if he could defeat some monsters and profit from the situation. Concurrently, security personnel were directing civilians and attempting to secure the streets as the Titan Guild fought against swarms of monsters rampaging through the city. The defensive line was already failing under the pressure from the sheer number of creatures, and Sang-ho was beginning to lose the stamina needed to continue the fight. Regardless of how many monsters he defeated, more creatures persistently appeared. The guild's members were reaching their breaking point. Although they appeared to have the advantage, the overall situation was not favorable. The guild's secretary, Hyena, observed the battle with concern from a safe distance. While the situation seemed stable due to the guild master's efforts, she could perceive that their forces were being spread thin. She felt that just one additional strong hunter could change the battle's outcome. Her thoughts turned to a man whom the guild master had recently identified as promising. She retrieved her phone and placed a call to Jinyuk. He was currently engaged in combat with some goblins when he answered. She proposed an opportunity for him to fight alongside the Titan Guild, for which he would receive substantial payment. He countered by requesting 5 times the standard compensation rate. She then suggested they convene at a pre-arranged location for further discussion. Upon meeting, she offered him 4 times the compensation, an offer he hesitantly accepted. Following the agreement, she provided him with a device to log his monster kills, allowing the guild to track his contribution. If his performance in the battle was deemed above average, he would receive the full amount he had requested. Having secured an opportunity to display his capabilities and receive proper remuneration, Jinyuk departed for the battle to lend his assistance. Hyena observed his departure with some reservation, uncertain if he would meet the high expectations Sang-ho had for him. Jinyuk had previously defeated Endoyen, an event she attributed to sheer luck, and his true skill level remained unverified. Upon reaching the battlefield, he immediately targeted a rampaging ogre, an action that astonished the onlookers. He succeeded in killing the beast with a single, swift attack, leading the crowd to assume he must be an A-rank hunter at minimum. While A-rank was close, Jinyuk felt that his current abilities placed him above that classification. He paused briefly to consume a mana potion and restore his energy. As a result of Lucia's rigorous training, he had successfully attained level 200. Under normal circumstances, facing an ogre would be impossible, but he now believed that as long as his mana reserves held, he could potentially match the performance of an S-rank hunter. Jinyuk currently has a stockpile of over 1,500 mana potions, a resource that transforms all the surrounding monsters into simple opportunities for profit. Elsewhere, Endoyen is fighting monsters alongside his guild members. He observes that the number of creatures is decreasing dramatically and turns to see a crowd observing someone defeating monsters with ease. He moves to check the situation himself and spots the one person he detests the most. He yells orders at the stunned hunters, telling them to stop daydreaming and resume fighting. He wonders why Jinyuk is present and who invited him. The mere sight of Jinyuk reminds Endoyen of their previous encounter and the embarrassing moment that was broadcast across the news. He concludes that the last time must have been a fluke. He reasons that this time, since Jinyuk is alone, there will be no issue in taking him out and putting him in his place. With that decision made, he rushes toward Jinyuk, intending to fix the man's nasty habit of being in the worst place at the wrong time. Unluckily for Endoyen, the C-rank hunter notices him far too early and successfully counters the attack, sending Endoyen flying and knocking him unconscious yet again. Jinyuk is too occupied to entertain the random crazy guy. Meanwhile, Sang-ho faces down a rampaging minotaur. His mana is almost gone, and he is out of stamina. The minotaur raises its club to attack just as Sang-ho considers the idea of retreating to regain his strength. Before the weapon can hit him, a voice calls out from behind, and Jinyuk jumps in from above. Jinyuk grabs the minotaur by the horn and slams it forcefully into the ground. For a C-rank hunter to defeat a minotaur with a single hit, it seems Sangho's judgment about Jinyuk was perfectly accurate. As the monster is taken down, Sangho approaches Jinyuk to show his appreciation for the help. Jinyuk informs him that the guild master's secretary had called and promised a significant payment in return for his assistance, so there is no need for thanks. Sangho then uses this chance to once again ask Jinyuk to join their guild. He suggests that if Jinyuk joins forces with them, opportunities like this will continue to appear. Jinyuk takes a moment to consider the offer, then tells Sangho that he will think about it after they finish clearing out the remaining monsters. As they are talking, Sangho receives a call from Hyena. She tells him to look at the sky. The clouds have turned black, and the weather has become fiery, filled with lightning. Something huge and menacing is lurking within the clouds, and it does not appear friendly. The entity shoots lightning down at everything, striking monsters and hunters alike, and damages buildings as it flies around. It is positioned so high in the sky that there is no way their skills can reach it. This means that there might be no way to attack it. Sangho suggests returning to his guild headquarters to assess the situation and invites Jinyuk to join him. Jinyuk reluctantly agrees, and together they meet back at Sangho's office. From there, they run different tests and simulations, concluding that nothing they have done so far can affect the creature or defend against its attacks. Every strategy they had employed thus far to stop the entity had been either nullified or destroyed. They needed to find an alternative with an enormous amount of firepower, one that could also engage targets from a significant distance. Lucia immediately came to Jinyuk's mind, and he realized a viable method to defeat the creature might exist after all. As Jinyuk departed to retrieve Lucia, the executives of the Titan Guild convened, discussing the amount of favoritism Sangho was displaying toward a C-rank hunter. The other guild members attempted to brainstorm different ways to bring the monster down, without relying on Jinyuk, but there was simply no other choice available. All other known methods were guaranteed to be ineffective, leaving them with the sole option of trusting the only hunter who had a potential plan. They considered requesting aid from another guild named Gadia, a large organization populated by A-rank mages and higher. Unfortunately, that particular guild was known for its indifference to casualties, and summoning them would almost certainly result in many deaths. The other members present in the room fell silent as they accepted that they truly had no alternative but to wait. Back at the apartment, Jinyuk emerged from the portal accompanied by Lucia. He thanked her for agreeing to help and promised her a reward of as many sweet confections from his world as she could possibly want. Together, they ascended to the top of the Titan Guild headquarters. Jinyuk showed her the monster that was currently terrorizing their city. He asked if she possessed the ability to defeat it, and she confirmed with certainty that she could. The creature was so massive, she remarked, that she could hit it with her eyes closed. The monster was designated as level 300, which represented the highest level monster ever recorded. She assured him she could eliminate it, but first she required some assistance. The building's roof was too fragile to withstand the force of her power, and she needed him to prepare a shield to absorb most of the impact if he wished to prevent the destruction of multiple buildings. With the preparations understood, Jinyuk contacted the guild leader to inquire about the potential collateral damage. Once they engaged the monster, damage to the surrounding buildings would be unavoidable. Sangho instructed him not to worry about that and to focus exclusively on bringing down the monster. With that matter settled, Jinyuk prepared a shield while Lucia charged 2 arrows to attack the beast. She aimed meticulously, then released the shots. The discharge produced a massive shockwave that forced Jinyuk backward even with his shield deployed. The 2 projectiles raced through the sky toward the monster, and in a mere second, landed a direct hit on the beast, eliminating it in a single strike. The damage inflicted was so immense that half of the monster's body was disintegrated from the impact. The Titan Guild watched from the ground, astounded that he had managed to resolve the situation so easily. Hunter Kang Jinyuk just continued to astound people. The backlash from Lucia's attack was powerful enough to leave smoking trail marks burned into the building's helipad. While it may not have been an appropriate time for restraint, the power displayed was far beyond expectations. Lucia, on the other hand, was more disappointed that the monster had proven to be so weak. This was not an accurate assessment. It was more that Lucia possessed a level of strength far exceeding that of any monster appearing in this world. Regardless, the objective was achieved, and it was time for her to return. She passed Jinyuk the tracking device that logged his points, which showed a remarkable reading of 240. With that, she turned to depart, but first offered him a warning about placing too much trust in others. She noted that when the stakes are high, people's judgment often becomes clouded by the prospect of wealth. She advised him to avoid being deceived, as she had been during her own adventures. Jinyuk gave her his assurance that he would be fine and would handle any issues that might arise. They parted ways, and Jinyuk proceeded down to the street, where he was met by Sang-ho and his secretary. They caught up to him, asking how he had successfully taken down such an enormous monster by himself. He politely declined to answer, stating that his method was a secret. One of the executives accompanying them took offense at this, declaring his disbelief that a C-rank hunter could defeat such a beast. Jinyuk responded by displaying the monster tracker, which registered a massive number of points, confirming he was responsible for the monster's defeat. Sang-ho quickly interjected, apologizing to Jinyuk for the executive's sharp remarks. The executive watched them with fury, feeling that Sang-ho was showing preference to a C-rank hunter over his own guild members. He concluded that a change was necessary, as Sang-ho was impeding the guild's future. The executive took out his phone and made a call to an unknown number. By the next day, the rumor had propagated throughout the city that the giant monster had been eliminated by an ordinary C-rank hunter. While members of the Titan Guild were skeptical, the fact was not difficult to confirm. Word also circulated that the guild master had personally offered this hunter direct admission into the Titan Guild, an offer that was refused. It was surmised that the hunter must be extremely confident in his skills to decline such a significant offer from Sang-ho. The rumors eventually reached members of the Ultron Guild. They had also received reports that Do-yoon had been hospitalized after the monster invasion. Do-yoon was known for his formidable skills, but the information suggested he had been taken down by this same rumored C-rank hunter. If that were true, it would lend credibility to the other stories. The scouts from the Ultron Guild decided they needed to meet with Jinyuk in person to verify this information. The Ultron Guild representatives hypothesized that he might have activated a hidden class, a development that was extraordinarily rare among hunters. If that hypothesis was correct, they concluded they had to either secure him for their guild before any rivals did, or, failing that, eliminate him. Jinyuk, in contrast, slept deeply following the intense battle. He had completely exhausted his stamina during the fight and had fallen unconscious at the first available moment. He awoke after 2 full days of profound sleep, realizing this was the backlash from his severe overexertion. He walked into his living room and discovered Lucia had created a substantial mess with all the snacks he had acquired for her. She had managed to consume the entire stash within those 2 days. She explained she had no other option, as there was no food remaining in the refrigerator, and the snacks were the only edible items available. She also remarked that she had been unable to return to the dungeon because he had not activated the portal for her. This statement confused Jinyuk, as he had never needed to consciously open it in the past. As far as he knew, it was perpetually active. He proceeded to his attic to show her that the portal was indeed open even at that moment. This contradicted her experience, as she insisted nothing had been there just moments before. She instructed him to move away from the doorway. When he did, the portal vanished. It was confirmed that there was nothing there once he had stepped back. Jinyuk had no explanation for this, as his entire experience had been of the portal being constantly accessible. Lucia offered a theory that the dungeon was responding exclusively to him, meaning the dungeon followed him wherever he went. It seemed the dungeon was somehow imprinted directly onto him. This implied a frightening possibility that the dungeon could have materialized directly onto his location, but luckily it was the result of a failed spell. He opted not to dwell on that disturbing idea, and instead ordered food for both of them. Lucia then expressed curiosity about how he had even managed to find his way back to the apartment after the monster battle. She revealed that she had cast a recognition suppression spell on the building, which should have made it impossible for anyone to locate. Jinyuk questioned why she would place such a spell on his home. She clarified that while he was unconscious, several strange individuals had repeatedly come by. They were from guilds called Ultron and Guardian, and their persistence became so annoying that she cast the spell to ensure they could not come back at all. Jinyuk was confused about why such large guilds would be searching for him, so he took out his phone to learn what had occurred while he was asleep. The very first headline he read immediately grabbed his attention. News reporting that he had defeated the new giant monster had spread widely online. There was even a video circulating that clearly showed him fighting alongside the Titan Guild. It seemed he had become famous virtually overnight. He recognized this was going to be a problem. It appeared that Jinyuk had become too avaricious, and his exploitation of Lucia's power had consequently put him in the spotlight. The hunter industry is notably territorial. And whenever a formidable competitor is identified, efforts are made to eliminate them as swiftly as possible. He chose not to dwell on past decisions. With Lucia finished eating, they traveled back into the dungeon to deliver their spoils to the dwarf. As a result of Lucia's overwhelmingly powerful shot, the monster's body was too compromised to be usable, and they were only successful in recovering its head. The old man was visibly frustrated with the elf for overdoing it and destroying valuable material. It seemed that he and Lucia possessed a mutual, natural animosity toward one another. Jinyuk interjected during their argument, asking the dwarf if he could craft anything from the remains. The dwarf took a moment and retrieved something from deep within the head, the organ that had allowed the beast to generate lightning. With that component, he could enchant the baseball bat to produce lightning as well. Jinyuk asked the dwarf how he wished to be compensated, but all the dwarf wanted was for the elf to get out of his workshop. Lucia began to shake with anger, and Jinyuk was forced to placate her by promising more sweets. After just managing to stop her from firing a hole straight through the dwarf's head, he headed back into the city to acquire the promised treats. On his route back home, he sensed something in an alley. It became apparent that someone was tracking him.